This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us on this Monday, May 17th, 2021. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, as Israel launches more airstrikes in Gaza following thousands of rocket attacks from Hamas. A different type of struggle is unfolding in Washington as Democrats are divided over support for Israel or Hamas. We're going to bring you a look at both conflicts. For the first time, a mainline denomination has elected a transgender bishop. We're going to tell you which one and about the beliefs of that bishop and that church. Could President Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan lead to another terrorist attack on America? We're going to bring you a look at why some experts believe it could happen. And saying farewell to a true pioneer of CBN News, we're going to bring you a look back at the remarkable career going back to the 1980s of one of our most outstanding correspondents. All those stories and more are ahead in today's edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to begin this half hour in the Middle East, where Israeli warplanes unleashed a new series of heavy airstrikes on several locations in Gaza City earlier today, as the battles between Israel and Hamas and other terrorists intensified in the heaviest fighting since the devastating war in 2014. Here in the United States, a political battle is brewing inside the Democratic Party over which side it should support. Dale Hurd is on the story.
In one of the deadliest days in the fighting, the Israeli military has unleashed a wave of heavy airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. This in response to more than 3,100 rockets launched into Israel by Palestinian fighters. 10 Israelis have died and as many as 200 Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he doesn't see the conflict ending anytime soon.
So it'll take some time. I hope it won't take long.
Meanwhile, in Washington, Joe Biden is facing a brewing insurrection within his own party over which side the U.S. should favor in the crisis. The so-called progressive wing of the party wants the White House to take a more hardline approach to Israel and address what it calls Israel's apartheid policies toward the Palestinians, even withholding U.S. aid as leverage.
As long as the message from Washington is that our military support for Israel is unconditional, Netanyahu's extremism, right-wing government will continue to expand settlements, continue to demolish homes, and continue to make the prospects for peace impossible.
On Sunday, 28 Senate Democrats, led by Georgia's John Ossoff, issued a statement calling for a ceasefire agreement. More than 24 House Democrats sent a letter to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken earlier this week calling for diplomatic pressure to prevent the displacement of Palestinians from East Jerusalem. And Senator Bernie Sanders wrote in the New York Times that the U.S. must stop being an apologist for the Netanyahu government. But so far, Democrat leaders like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi aren't joining those calls.
I think the president took the appropriate, proportionate response to it all. The fact is that we have a very close relationship with Israel, and Israel's security is a national security issue for us as our friend, a democratic country in the region.
Israel took heavy criticism after an airstrike razed a building in Gaza that housed the offices of the Associated Press. Netanyahu said he showed evidence to the U.S. that the building housed a terrorist command center. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And now Chris Mitchell, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, joins us. So, Chris, you interviewed former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, about U.S.'s support. What did he emphasize?
Well, Ephraim, he emphasized he was very glad for the support of President Biden so far. He knows how important the U.S. is, particularly when it has a veto power on the UN Security Council that it's already used. But he knows he's getting a lot of pressure, as Dale just reported. And the Democratic Party, which typically in the past has been pro-Israel, is really seeing a lot of pressure internally, whether or not they're going to support Hamas or they're going to support Israel. Yet it seems like right now that Israel is resolute to finish this campaign. In fact, they've been preparing for this probably ever since 2014. They want to degrade Hamas's war machine. They may do it with or without U.S. support, but right now they seem to be very, very determined to make sure this is not going to happen anytime soon again.
Chris, did Mr. Dermer mention anything about evangelical Christian support at this time?
Very much so, Ephraim. In fact, he made this comment to us. He said that the backbone of Israel's support is the U.S., and the backbone of U.S. support is evangelical Christians. He was ambassador here in Israel, in the United States for more than 7 years, so he saw that firsthand throughout the country. And he mentioned the fact that there's people in the streets around the world that are condemning Israel. We've seen that in London. We've seen that in Toronto, even in New Zealand. And he hopes Christians will either go into the streets or do what they can to stand with Israel, call their representatives, whether senators or congressmen and women, and to stand with Israel. He sees that as very, very important, particularly at this time when much of the world will be condemning Israel for what's happening right now.
Chris, looking back at your reporting, you've reported on the conflicts with Hamas and Israel in 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014. Are the tactics Hamas is using in 2021 the same?
Very much so, Ephraim. In fact, it's almost like watching a rerun of the same movie. And what Hamas is doing is a double war crime. First of all, they're firing rockets out of civilian areas, which they're not permitted to do under international law, and then they're firing them indiscriminately into civilian areas. We saw that just firsthand a few days ago when we were down right on the Gaza border. 4 times we had to go into either go into a bomb shelter or literally lie on the ground. And often their leaders use their families as human shields. In fact, sometimes they just travel with their families knowing that Israel will try to avoid civilian casualties. Now, what Israel does, on the other hand, is that they warn people about the buildings they're going to be targeting. They call it roof knocking. They hit a device on a roof to alert people to get out of that building. In fact, there's been 2 15-story buildings with no casualties. That's very hard to do because what they do is they just warn people to get out. It's not perfect, obviously, with all the number of injuries and deaths right now inside Gaza, but few, if any, armies will go to these extents to try to avoid civilian casualties, what Israel is doing right now.
Chris, how important is the role of the media in all of this?
It's vital. It's vital, Ephraim, because what Hamas does is they hit Israel. When Israel responds and may, God forbid, hit or harm or kill civilians, then the media blames Israel, and sort of it becomes a tit-for-tat battle. Both sides get blamed. Both sides say they should stop without realizing who is the aggressor in this. It becomes this moral muddle, this moral equivalency, and but it fails to recognize who's the aggressor and who's at fault, and that's why the media is so important in these conflicts.
All right, Chris Mitchell, our Middle East Bureau Chief, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. Coming up, for the first time, a mainline denomination has elected a transgender person as a bishop. We're going to tell you which one and what the bishop has to say about Christian views on sex and theology. We've got the story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
For the first time, a mainline denomination has elected a transgender bishop. Here to tell us about that and a new move by Disney to introduce gay characters into a children's cartoon is Trey Goins-Phillips of FaithWire.com. So, Trey, what denomination was this, and what can you tell us about the bishop's beliefs on sexuality?
So the denomination was actually the largest, or is the largest, Lutheran denomination in the country, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So the bishop's name, or I should say the bishop-elect, Megan Rohr, she identifies as a woman, was born, or I'm sorry, the other way around, was born female but identifies as male, will be installed on September 11th, later this year. And Rohr has said that she favors dismantling the theology of sexuality, which was first established in the denomination of the First Council of Nicaea in AD 325. Essentially, they didn't have the same language, obviously, that we would use today, but it disallowed transgender identified people from serving in clerical positions, from serving as pastors. And Rohr has said that dismantling that theology is the appropriate way to go.
So where do evangelical Lutherans stand on sexuality compared to the Bible and Christian history?
So this denomination in particular has been very affirming of the LGBTQ community. The bishop now, Elizabeth Eaton, has said that she supports the broad spectrum of sexual identities, as she's called it, saying that not everyone is born male or female. The ELCA has ordained transgender people before to pastoral positions, but this is the first time that a bishop has been a transgender identified bishop has been installed into that position. But this is something that's very much a part of their theological framework.
All right, let's turn to Disney now. What is it doing with a children's cartoon series that's 20 years old?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people, maybe from my generation, I'm 29 years old, might remember the Proud Family, like you said, from about 20 years ago, Ephraim. They're bringing that show back, and this time it'll actually center on a multi-ethnic gay couple, two dads raising an adopted daughter who's a teenager, and she's going to be a racial teenage activist. Racism is something that she's going to be is going to play a central role in the show, and obviously she's going to be combating that. But I think the crux, the frustration for a lot of Christians and concern for a lot of believers is, like I said, the fact that they're going to bring in this gay couple to be the lead characters in something that's obviously going to be targeting young viewers, children, as well as people from our generation, but a lot of young viewers, which I think is concerning to a lot of parents, because Disney is starting to do this more and more with a lot of their cartoons.
All right, Trey Goins-Phillips of FaithWire.com. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to remind you at home that you can get more from FaithWire.com by watching this evening at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and you can find it on the CBN News Channel. Still ahead, could President Biden's withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan lead to a resurgence of terrorist groups there, even another attack on America? We're going to have a look at that question when we come back.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
a 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Another attack on America by al-Qaeda. That is the warning of what could happen now that President Biden is pulling U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. George Thomas brings us a look at why that withdrawal could mean a terrible outcome for that country and more terrorism here at home.
Ms. Sadat fled to Iran 20 years ago when the Taliban took control of her country, Afghanistan.
When I was in Iran, the media used to show the destruction and war in Afghanistan. In general, we were horrified by the Taliban.
After returning home a decade ago to open this beauty parlor in Kabul, she now fears the Taliban's return.
I didn't achieve what I have now easily. I worked very hard for it. If the Taliban come one day and don't allow us to work, I will have to go to Iran again and live there as a migrant.
Her makeup artists and customers worry the radical Islamic group will once again impose harsh Islamic Sharia laws that often targeted girls and women.
We don't want the old Afghanistan. I haven't seen Taliban, but I fear them.
Congressman Mike Waltz tells CBN News there's no doubt in his mind that al-Qaeda will come roaring back when the Taliban gain control of Afghanistan.
I do fear a Taliban takeover of the country and a resurgent al-Qaeda that will attack the homeland again. We saw this when the Obama administration pulled out of Iraq too soon. That led to the rise of ISIS, attacks across Europe, and inspired attacks right here in the United States.
The Florida Republican, a decorated Special Forces officer, led multiple combat tours to Afghanistan. Waltz says by abandoning the critical U.S. Bagram Air Base, Biden gives up a strategic military foothold in the backyard of America's greatest rivals.
If you just look at the map, Afghanistan is the only country in the world where we have an air base that physically borders China. Afghanistan is on the western flank of China, the southern flank of Russia, the eastern flank of Iran. Why would we just give that base up, especially when the Afghan government wants us to stay?
Mark Polymeropoulos conducted multiple covert missions to Afghanistan during his 26-year career with the CIA.
There's no doubt this is one of those foreign policy decisions that I'm afraid might come back to haunt the Biden administration.
Retiring in 2019 and now writing about his experience, Polymeropoulos is the author of the upcoming book, Clarity in Crisis. He tells CBN News that by pulling out, the U.S. also gives up its huge intelligence gathering and covert operations network, which took years to build following 9/11. In addition to withdrawing some 3,500 troops, Biden is ordering hundreds of covert forces back home.
The bottom line is, without U.S. forces on the ground, that means U.S. intelligence personnel will not be on the ground. And that really hurts us when it comes to human intelligence. That's the art of spotting, assessing, developing, recruiting, and handling a human source of penetration of a terrorist group without U.S. officers being on the ground. That really takes that away a key capability for us.
As the U.S. withdrawal ramps up, Waltz worries about the fate and future of thousands of Afghans who risked their lives to work alongside the Americans.
All of those people that have been working with us, that have stood with us against extremism for all of these years, are going to be hunted down by the Taliban. Many of them are in a panic and reaching out to me.
On the streets of Kabul, Afghans can only hope and pray for peace after a suicide truck bomber killed 21 people this week.
I'm worried about explosions, killings, robberies, thefts, unemployment, and an unknown future. These are all what I worry about.
Afghan officials can only try to reassure a nervous public ahead of the U.S. withdrawal by September 11th.
Peace is my hope and the hope for all Afghans. I hope Afghanistan could have peace, and I hope I can see it.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Coming up, CBN News says farewell to one of its true pioneers, Washington correspondent Paul Strand. We're going to bring you a look at his amazing career here at the network. When we come back, stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
From Washington, D.C.
Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation.
Uncompromising stories, interviews, and analysis from veteran journalists David Brody, John Jessup, Jenna Browder, and Eric Phillips, bringing you the political news that matters.
Regulations on the energy industry are going to have dramatic ripple effects throughout the economy.
News you can trust.
We're people who are committed to protecting the most weakest and the most vulnerable.
Watch Faith Nation, weeknights at 6. Your news channel, your shows, the stories you care about. Anytime you want, anywhere you want. Download the CBN News app today.
And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Today, CBN News says goodbye to one of its true pioneers. Correspondent Paul Strand is retiring after 35 years of faithfully serving the ministry. As we say farewell, let's take a look back at his incredible career and his impact.
When Paul Strand was just 17 years old, the Lord told him he'd work at a place called CBN News, which didn't even exist at the time, and forge a new kind of journalism. As we know, that prophecy was fulfilled, and for 35 years now, Strand has shared encouraging stories of where God's moving around the world.
It's been such a blessing to fulfill what the Lord told me I would do. I can't think of a better way to live your life.
They are so grateful that we liberated them, and they're so relieved now
that Saddam is out of there.
It was a long, hard slog to get up to the 8,400-foot-high rim of the volcano.
People were waving their hands saying they had received those healings. And biking doesn't just have to be about you and getting to work. It's also fun recreational activity for the entire family. The last great awakening in America started right here in New York City. You can fit your faith and science together. You hear about the mission field, you think third world, Africa. But what about this? Most of the people here at the March for Life are younger folks. I could see the smoke billowing out of the Pentagon, and I realized, my gosh, this is so real. There it is. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Paul says 13 years after God spoke to him about CBN News, his phone rang.
A guy calls me from CBN News, and he says, Paul Strand, your moment of destiny is here. Come work at CBN News.
He didn't just find a career at CBN.
If you'll commit to forever,
you'll get there together.
When I met Susan Burns, first date, it was like, I can't live without this person. This is the one. We've been married for 33 years, and what's great is to have a wife that worked in CBN, who was a producer herself. She understood. She understood the long hours, the many trips we have to do.
Paul started as a CBN News assignment editor. Then during the 1996 Democratic Convention, God used unusual circumstances to open a new door.
All the reporters were basically knocked out and sick as could be, so I had to pick up the microphone and off I went, started to do the stories throughout the convention, and it never turned back.
Since then, Paul has been one of the ministry's most prolific storytellers.
Why would a camel be hanging out on Capitol Hill?
Constantly searching for stories with hope behind our headlines.
Just after a while, the stories I was doing, when people would ask me what my beat is, I said, what's God doing in the earth? We look down next to our artillery trucks, and we can see boom, 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 boom.
Throughout his career, Paul's covered war zones and shared amazing testimonies. Around D.C., he's known as the biking reporter.
You drivers pay about $11,000 a year for your transportation. Bicyclists, $350 a year.
Although just a few years ago, a bike accident left him with a concussion and 2 brain bleeds.
What got me to come back was I said, Satan's trying so hard to knock me out. I must have my best days ahead.
8 months later, Paul was back on the job and his bike, seeking the Lord's direction for his coverage.
I've been impressed that it seems like the Lord has really been on those stories for the last 4 or 5 years, to where every one of them I say, wow, this ministers. There's an angle in here that can change people's lives if they're really listening to this.
For Paul, news is ministry.
That's been the main thing to me, is just this idea that I help change some lives, even as a journalist. That you don't have to be a pastor, you don't have to be a minister. God can work right on through you, and he can work right on through the deeds of your hands.
As for what's next for Paul Strand, for now he's going to take some well-deserved time off while remaining open to go wherever God wants to lead him. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well-deserved indeed, Paul. You will be missed. Time now for your Monday motivation. Here's a word I like to leave with you. We are all under construction. While it isn't always pretty, it is the process of progress. And know this, we are all in process. With that word, I encourage you to make this a marvelous Monday, and be sure to make this a wonderful rest of the week, and do that on purpose. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. We thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.